day here going down to Portland, Maine.
Tonight, Peter Mahegan, Jean Blake, Mike Barnacle, Chronicle, the New England news magazine.
Good evening. Tonight we continue our special springtime series of Main Streets and Back Roads, a New England Chronicle. Tonight we head for the North Country in New Hampshire. Our main street is the Androscoggin River, which begins and ends in Maine, but winds its way through part of New Hampshire as well. Peter, you began in Berlin, New Hampshire, not far from the Canadian border.
That's right, and you pronounced that exactly correctly.
Thank you.
You know the old saying, if you don't like the weather in New England, just wait a minute. Well, in spring, you might say, if you don't like the weather, just go upriver a few miles. Tonight, we discover the real New England spring, where the snow is 40 feet deep in some places, but the salmon and trout fishing is just fine, thank you. We begin in Berlin, New Hampshire, a town where the lumber and paper industry has learned to survive along a clean countryside. Androscoggin River. It's crystal clear near its source, icy cold and rushing. Its Indian name was given by the first settlers of this North Country wilderness, just 60 miles from Canada. Androscoggin means fish country in springtime. This fast-flowing body of water winds its way for 170 miles, beginning in western Maine and tumbling through this mountainous region of northern New Hampshire. Before turning west again and spilling its waters into the Atlantic in Brunswick, Maine, the Androscoggin has provided a mill with electricity, some of the best trout fishing around, and a place to escape. Upcountry, it's a river surrounded by thick forests. There are no camps or billboards. But it wasn't always this way. For 100 years, the Androscoggin was a transportation system, moving millions of logs downstream to the paper mill in Berlin. An industry was being born, but a river was soon to die. By 1941, the resin from the trees and the waste from the mill had poisoned the Androscoggin. Fish were nowhere to be caught. But before the days of the EPA, a river renaissance began. The local paper industry spent millions on pollution control. And today, the river is beginning to live up to its name. It flows clean and free of logs into the mill town of Berlin. It's not hard to tell that we're only about 60 miles from the Quebec border. French Canadians flocked here in the mid-19th century to work in the mills, and they're still the dominant ethnic group, making up about 70% of Berlin's population. But other nationalities settled here as well: Germans, Italian, Irish, Scandinavians, blending with the native Yankees to make up a New Hampshire melting pot. Philip Glasson is one of Berlin's longtime residents, although he calls himself a foreigner, having only moved to Berlin in 1925. He remembers the days when the railroad put Berlin on the map.
It was 1929 before they plowed the road through Pinkham Notch. We were isolated here. There was no way to get out, except they had about 4 or 5 trains a day here going down to Portland, Maine.
So what'd you do in the wintertime?
Well, this is what everybody says. But actually, there's more things going on here than there is in Boston. And you can go 5 or 10 miles from the center of the city, and you're in the wilderness. Moose and bear and deer.
Since the first mill was established in 1853, the paper and lumber industries have dominated Berlin. The mill provides jobs to 2,300 of the town's 13,000 residents. And good jobs at that. The minimum mill wage is $9.06 an hour. But there are certain risks a mill worker must take. Leo Moliere has taken them for 15 years while operating this 4.5-ton crane.
A few times there, the pedal locked on it, and the bucket kept coming towards me. There was no way of releasing it. I finally turned the boom so she went by me. The only thing you can do then is shut your eyes.
The James River Company owns the mill and 600,000 acres of forest in New England. From those trees comes a profit of millions of dollars. But it must spend some of those millions on pollution control. For besides being known for its paper, Berlin is also known for its smell. Depending on which way the wind is blowing, the sulfur process used in making paper is a noxious reminder of industry's cost to our environment. The forests surrounding Berlin not only provide wood for the mill, but wood used in an entirely different way. Instead of making paper, Ingemar and Guan Hansen use it to make shoes, wooden shoes, clogs. 3 years ago, they moved to Berlin from Copenhagen, lured by low-interest loans and Berlin's Scandinavian community. Today, as a result of imported shoe sales increasing in the U.S., they've had to cut their production by 50%. Bash Shoes, also located in Berlin, just laid off 185 workers as well. Because leather imports make up 70% of the shoe industry, the Hansens have been forced to diversify in their use of New Hampshire wood.
We were running 2 shifts here, 16 hours a day for 2.5 years, and we were really busy. But all of a sudden we just couldn't compete. We see the entire shoe industry in America have really big problem at the moment because of the imports.
And what does it feel like coming from a cultural mecca like Copenhagen to an industrial town in the far north of New Hampshire?
Well, we have a lot of things to do where we are coming from, but up here is nothing to do.
For many people who live along the Androscoggin, nothing to do is a state of mind, not a fact of life. Like the days before logging, trout now swim in the river, and Atlantic salmon are beginning to make spawning runs here again. That's good news for Leo Durant, a retired mill worker, who moved to this 2-room house 10 years ago, just to be close to the Androscoggin's banks. Are you the best fisherman up this way?
No, I wouldn't consider myself the best fisherman, but I'll get my share. Well, let's put it this way, I want to get my share.
You must have a fish story, the one that got away.
The one that got away, I almost jumped in after it.
How big?
That one was as long as my arm. I'm telling you, that fish weighed 8-9 pounds. And I had it next to the boat. I was getting ready to net it.
Yep.
And the damn thing got off.
Just the hook just pulled out, huh?
Yeah.
Did you cry?
I didn't cry, but I felt like it. But what are you going to do? You can't get them all.
I'll bet that thing was about that long, Peter.
We didn't get any that day either. I don't know what I do to these people. You know, they're all great fishermen. Somehow I show up. It's like the little Abner character, you know, with the black cloud. No more fish.
Quickly, is the river as clean as it looks?
Well, it's very clean up in the northern part by Errol, where we did the fishing there. If you get down below Berlin, it's not as clean, but it's really improving. And the tip-off is that the river now is starting to freeze up again. It used to be so polluted it wouldn't freeze, but it does now.
Now they can work on that air, huh?
Right.
In a moment, some transplanted New Englanders and their stained glass, plus Jasper, 82 years old and still hiking the New Hampshire mountains. Stay with us.